Imagine you are a nomadic warrior stepping onto the Pontic Steppe about 5,000 years ago. You are, moving your herds across this massive, sweeping landscape, and you need to prove to everyone that you own this land, like to competing groups, or maybe even your own people.
Right, and you don't build a fortress for that. You don't construct a walled city or anything permanent like that. Instead, you find a 500-year-old local sanctuary built by the people who were there long before you.
Exactly. And you strategically, just painstakingly bury your own dead exactly in the geometric center of it. I mean, today we are looking at a 5,000-year-old case of ancient real estate theft. Or, well, depending on how you look at it, a masterclass in cultural appropriation.
Yeah, it really challenges our basic assumptions about the past. We often assume archaeology is like hitting pause on a tape deck, that the story of a monument just stops the very moment its original builders leave.
Right, like it's frozen in time.
Exactly. But the landscape is dynamic. Successive generations are constantly reading the terrain, interpreting the monuments left behind, and deciding how to weave themselves into that existing fabric.
And that dynamic process is exactly what we are exploring today. We are taking a deep dive into this really brilliant academic paper published in the journal Antiquity. The research is driven by Dr. Svetlana Ivanova and a phenomenal team of colleagues.
Right, including Dr. Nikitin, Simon Rydchenko, and Dr. Dmytro Kiossak.
Yes. And they've brought us this highly detailed case study of a specific site in the North Pontic Steppe in modern-day Ukraine known as Revova Kurgan 3.
It is a remarkable piece of synthesis. I mean, they managed to tie together physical excavation data, geographic analysis, and modern genetics to reconstruct not just what happened at this specific mound, but how early human populations handled massive demographic shifts.
Which is the core mission of our deep dive today. When a new mobile group of people moves into a territory that's already dotted with the sacred sites of the locals, what goes through their minds?
Right. Do they bulldoze the old monuments to assert dominance? Or do they co-opt them?
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand the mindset of the newcomers, we first have to set the scene. We really need to look closely at the specific sacred canvas they were moving onto.
Absolutely. So for that, we need to travel back to the Eneolithic period. We're looking at a time frame roughly between 4,500 and 3050 BCE.
And this is in the northwestern Pontic Steppe, right?
Exactly. And the original inhabitants there created something highly intentional at the Revova 3 site. If you look at the stratigraphy, they didn't just, pile up some dirt on the grass.
Right. They executed a major labor-intensive terraforming project.
Yeah, they started by stripping away the topsoil entirely, just digging down to expose a platform of underlying yellow loam.
Which immediately signals to anyone looking at the site that this was meant to be a permanent, deeply significant fixture. I mean, you are completely altering the geological profile of the hilltop.
Precisely the point. They took that extracted loam and built a mound. Then they surrounded this mound with a semicircular ditch.
But they didn't close the circle, did they?
No, they didn't. They left a causeway-like an intentional pathway, or entrance-oriented, specifically towards the southwest.
Okay, that's really specific.
It is. They also added 2 round pits into the architecture and encircled the entire mound with an arrangement of stones laid out on a strict east-west axis.
So it's a heavily designed, geometrically aligned space. And right in the center of this platform, they dug a pit.
Right, which the researchers catalog as Burial 19.
And that dates back to somewhere between 3711 and 639 BCE. But the treatment of the human remains here is, it's incredibly distinct.
Oh, absolutely. The remains were disarticulated.
Yeah, and their positioning suggests they were originally placed inside some sort of organic container, like maybe a bag or a basket that has since decayed away.
What's fascinating here is what happens next, or rather what doesn't happen. The archaeological evidence shows that this pit was not immediately covered up.
It was just left open.
Yeah, it was left completely open to the elements for an extended period. Furthermore, there's clear evidence of repeated fires burning within those associated ditches.
Wow. So if you put all those architectural clues together, the open pit, the active fires in the ditches, the southwest entrance, the stone alignments, it paints a picture of an active sanctuary. I love thinking about it as an ancient open-air cathedral.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Or like a community plaza, It wasn't a closed tomb where you just bury an elder, seal it up, and walk away forever. It was a living, breathing ritual space.
Yeah, you can easily imagine the Eneolithic community repeatedly gathering there. The fires illuminating the ditches at night, with that open pit serving as a powerful focal point for their ongoing ceremonies.
That's a really vivid image.
That captures the essence of the site perfectly. It was a functioning piece of their spiritual infrastructure. The Eneolithic people were continuously engaging with it. But, as is the inevitable rule of human history, demographics shift.
Right. Centuries pass, and a massive wave of change sweeps across the steppe. So we fast forward to the early Bronze Age, roughly between 3300 and 2200 BCE, and we see the arrival of the Yamna culture.
Yes, these are highly mobile, pastoralist populations. They're moving vast distances across the landscape.
And when they inevitably arrive at the Revova site, they are confronted with this ancient, weathered Eneolithic sanctuary.
And their decision on how to handle it is striking. They decide to radically renovate.
They build a brand new, significantly larger mound directly over the old Eneolithic one, right?
Exactly. They dig a wider, shallower, circular ditch around the perimeter, but the architectural choice that truly stands out is where they place their primary dead.
This is the detail that completely stopped me when I was reading the paper.
Yeah.
The Yamna dig their central burial, which is labeled Burial 3, and it's securely covered by two massive stone slabs.
Yeah, very heavy slabs.
Right. But they dig this new grave perfectly into the geometric center of the old Eneolithic mound, without disturbing the ancient burial 19 sitting just below it.
The spatial awareness required to execute that is staggering. I mean, the centers of both the centuries-old Eneolithic mound and the brand-new Yamna mound coincide almost perfectly.
It's just wild. And they didn't stop there, did they?
No, over time, they continue to use this newly modified site as a central cemetery for their own people. They add burial 16, then burials 4 and 7 around the edges.
And eventually, they build up another layer of earth that contains burial 15.
Yes. And if you look at the forensic details of those later additions, they are textbook Yamna burials.
Right. The individuals are in contracted positions on their backs or sides. The pits feature ledges cut into the walls, post holes, wooden covers.
And don't forget the remnants of organic mats and the heavy application of ochre.
Oh, right. The ochre. It's such a distinct signature.
And the inclusion of those specific architectural features is vital for understanding their worldview. I mean, why go through the trouble of carving ledges and sinking post holes to support wooden covers over a grave?
It suggests they weren't just dropping bodies into the dirt.
Exactly. They were treating the grave as a constructed subterranean house for the afterlife. This aligns perfectly with a nomadic pastoralist culture trying to establish a permanent conceptual home on a landscape they are constantly moving across.
The researchers refer to this deliberate layering of use as the continuity of sacred spaces. But wait, I have to push back on this sacred continuity idea for a second.
Well, quite go for it.
Because if you look at the topographic data provided in the paper, Revova Kurgan 3 is not exactly the Great Pyramid of Giza. I mean, it is barely 1.1 meters high. It's just a very subtle bump on the landscape.
True, it's small. But geographically, it sits exactly at a point where the local orographic lines converge.
Right, and because of the specific contours of the hills, standing on this tiny 1.1 meter mound gives you an uninterrupted 25-kilometer line of sight straight down the Velykyi Kuialnyk River.
It commands an incredibly strategic viewpoint of the valley.
Exactly. So Occam's razor says this is just a highly strategic hill, right? If I am a nomadic pastoralist managing large herds, and I want a vantage point to keep an eye on the river valley, or just a prominent spot that my people can easily navigate back to, I am going to pick the hill with the 25-kilometer view.
That's a very practical way to look at it.
Right. Why assume this is some deep, deliberate, sacred continuity? Why couldn't two completely disconnected groups of people, separated by centuries, just independently realize this was prime real estate?
It is a rigorous, necessary question. And Dr. Kuialnyk and the research team tackle that exact counterargument. The pure visibility of the hilltop would absolutely attract unconnected groups. If all we had was two graves on the same hill, the convenience theory would hold a lot of weight.
But that's not all we have.
Exactly. The physical mechanics of the excavation make coincidence incredibly difficult to sustain.
Because of the pinpoint precision of Burial 3.
Right. If you are just a newly arrived nomad looking for a prominent hill with a great view of the river, there are plenty of other natural ridges nearby that offer the exact same strategic advantages.
That makes sense.
You do not accidentally dig your new burial chamber into the exact, mathematically perfect center of an overgrown mound and then miraculously stop your shovels mere inches before obliterating the older grave beneath it. That level of precision requires intimate knowledge of what lies beneath the soil.
Wow. So they had to know Burial 19 was down there. They were targeting it.
The physical evidence leaves almost no other conclusion. Not only did they know it was there, they took immense calculated care not to destroy it.
That is fascinating.
And if we look at the Yamna culture broadly across the steppe, this behavior is not an isolated incident at Revova. They have a well-documented systemic pattern of interacting with pre-existing structures.
Like, what else did they do?
Well, they frequently modify older rock art to incorporate their own motifs. They even have a known habit of taking Eneolithic stelae, those large carved stone figures for the previous culture, intentionally damaging or altering them, and then physically incorporating them into their own Yamna graves.
Okay, that context is crucial. It changes it from a one-off coincidence to a cultural pattern of behavior. They were highly aware of the past and actively manipulated it.
Absolutely.
But that brings us to the most important question. If the Yamna were systematically targeting these ancient Eneolithic sites, why? What did a mobile group of herders get out of digging into a 500-year-old sanctuary?
To answer that, the researchers realized they had to look past the dirt, the mounds, and the stones. They had to look at the microscopic level. And this is where Profecta Nikitan's suggestion to utilize modern ancient DNA or aDNA analysis completely blows the story wide open.
Here's where it gets really interesting. They managed to extract DNA from that original Eneolithic individual in the bottom pit burial 19.
Yes, which is no small feat.
Definitely. And the analysis reveals that this person possessed what geneticists call Yusutov ancestry.
Right, and the way the aDNA differentiates the lineages is key to understanding the landscape before the Yamna even arrived. We rely on ancient DNA to trace two distinct lines.
The Y chromosome gives us the direct male lineage.
Exactly. In the case of the Eneolithic individual in Burial 19, that male line points back to the highlands of the Near East.
Okay, wow. But the mitochondrial DNA, which traces the direct female line, was firmly rooted right there on the local Pontic Steppe.
Yes. So the Yusutov population wasn't a monolith at all. It was already this complex synthesis of migrations and local integrations long before the Bronze Age.
But the real aha moment of the paper is what happens when they compare that Eneolithic Yusutov DNA to the incoming Yamna population. The Yamna gene pool originally formed much further east, over in the Caucasus Lower Volga area.
Right.
But when the geneticists run the comparisons, they find that roughly half of the Yusutov genetic ancestry is shared directly with the Yamna.
It is a monumental finding.
Yeah.
I mean, it redefines the relationship between these groups entirely.
It proves there's a partial genetic continuity between the older Eneolithic population and the newly arriving Yamna.
Exactly. They were not alien to one another. Despite the centuries that separated the construction of the two mounds, they shared a deep underlying biological history.
And the authors suggest this genetic link is deeply tied to the spread of a steppe-originating religion.
Yes. The idea is that these mobile pastoralist groups weren't just sharing fragments of DNA, they were sharing a fundamental overarching worldview, a shared vocabulary of the sacred.
That makes a lot of sense.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it completely changes how we view nomadic expansions. Mobile populations face a very unique geopolitical challenge. If you don't build massive, permanent walled cities, how do you assert control over a vast territory?
Right. How do you prove to your rivals and to yourselves that you have a legitimate right to occupy and rule that land? You use the landscape itself as your architecture of power. I was trying to visualize this while reading, and the best analogy I could think of is, imagine moving into an older relative's house.
We're like this.
You want to make it yours, but you don't tear the house down. Instead, you take your own family photos and you deliberately, carefully place them into the beautiful antique frames that are already sitting prominently on the mantelpiece.
That is such a vivid way to put it.
You are publicly, visibly proving that you belong in that space. You are linking your present identity to the established, respected past of the house.
That is a perfect encapsulation of what the Yamna were doing on the steppe. By burying their dead in the exact center of the ancient sanctuary, utilizing those subterranean houses with wooden covers, they weren't erasing the previous culture.
They were claiming it.
Yes, they were aggressively intertwining their own ancestors with the ancestral landscape. Religion and the physical appropriation of ritual spaces became a sophisticated political tool. It fostered a sense of belonging, legitimized their presence, and exerted control over the territory.
It's brilliant. It is ancient psychological warfare wrapped in spiritual reverence. They're saying this sacred ground is our sacred ground.
Truly.
But that ancient drive to claim and hold a landscape feels incredibly heavy when you consider what is happening on that exact same soil today. I mean, Dr. Ivanova and her team didn't just casually stroll out to Revova Kurgan 3 on a sunny afternoon to dig this up.
No, absolutely not. The context of the archaeology itself is an inescapable part of this narrative. This was not a leisurely academic endeavor with unlimited time and resources.
Far from it. Revova Kurgan 3 was excavated as part of a massive rescue operation. Between 1998 and 2018, the Ukrainian government was pushing forward with major construction and development efforts.
Right, and Professor Svetlana Ivanova led the archaeological teams racing against the clock to excavate these kurgans before they were permanently destroyed by modern bulldozers.
It really highlights the vital, often desperate nature of archaeological preservation.
It does. And it's worth noting that the brilliant synthesis we are discussing today, connecting the physical mound structure to the new DNA findings and the broader cultural shifts, happened largely because Dr. Kuialnyk was systematically looking back through those older rescued data sets.
Sometimes finding context in legacy data is just as critical as digging new trenches.
Exactly. But the current reality for these researchers is heartbreaking. The paper explicitly outlines how the ongoing war in Ukraine has severely restricted, and in many places entirely halted, fieldwork.
Right. It is simply too dangerous to go out and survey the steppe. You can't safely use tools like ground-penetrating radar in a landscape that is actively contested.
And the scientific community is being forced to adapt to the conflict. The researchers mention efforts to shift some of their focus to the Republic of Moldova, collaborating with local colleagues across the border to continue tracking these ancient cultural movements.
But even that adaptation is strained. They note that critical funding mechanisms, like the support they previously received from the Grand Programme de Recherche Human Past out of the University of Bordeaux, have ended.
It is a stark reminder that science and our understanding of human heritage is deeply vulnerable to the geopolitical realities of the present.
It really is. So what does this all mean? We've spent this deep dive talking about a 1.1-meter mound, the nuances of mitochondrial DNA, and the architectural choices of Bronze Age pastoralists. But for you listening right now, why should a 5,000-year-old pile of dirt in the Pontic Steppe matter to your life today?
I believe it matters because it offers a profound evidence-based insight into human nature during times of massive cultural collision. We often carry this assumption that when a new group takes over a territory, the default human instinct is total destruction.
Right, that we must erase the past to build the future.
Exactly. But Revova Kurgan 3 proves that the human instinct for synthesis is just as old and arguably much more powerful.
And you see that instinct around us all the time if you know what to look for.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When you walk through any modern city and you see a beautiful 19th century church that has been carefully converted into a vibrant community center, or you see a crumbling industrial brick warehouse that has been transformed into high-end loft apartments, you are witnessing the exact same psychological behavior.
We crave the continuity of spaces. We desperately want a connection to the past, even as we aggressively adapt it for our present needs. The Yamna were acting on that exact same human impulse 5,000 years ago on the steppe.
It really is a masterclass in how geography, genetics, and culture intertwine. The Yamna didn't merely conquer a physical landscape, they wove themselves into its existing spiritual and historical fabric.
This deep dive has completely reshaped how I view these ancient sites. It's not just about an Eneolithic platform or the precise Yamna burial architecture, or even the fact that their DNA shared roots in the Caucasus and the Near East. It's about how all of those complex elements were deliberately layered on top of each other to engineer a story of belonging.
Precise.
But I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought based on what we've explored today. We know the Yamna deliberately targeted and dug into that Eneolithic mound.
Right, and we know from modern ADNA that they shared some deep, distant genetic ancestry.
Exactly. But what if the specific Yamna individuals who actually dug that grave 5,000 years ago didn't actually know who was buried beneath them?
Oh, that is a fascinating extrapolation. I mean, the original Eneolithic burial was already centuries old. It likely predated any reliable oral history by the time the Yamna arrived.
Right. What if they had absolutely no historical memory of the specific Eneolithic people who built Revova 3? What if the Yamna simply saw a prominent, clearly sacred site, felt a vague, opportunistic sense of ancestral connection, and completely fabricated a retroactive myth?
Like they just pointed at the ground and decided, yes, these ancient, unknown bones belong to our direct, heroic ancestors.
Exactly. Using that brilliant retroactive storytelling to politically justify their aggressive expansion across Europe. It makes you wonder how much of human history, even the history we hold most sacred today, is just a highly successful, retroactively engineered story. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the sources. Keep questioning the layers of the past, and we will catch you next time.